Guys, I am so done with bought potting mix. Last year I had problems with a whole lot of my tomato plants dying because they were starved of nutrients because the potting mix had something wrong with it. And this year I've just got a bag of stuff that's growing mold in my plants. One thing I love about growing plants from seed is you can grow a whole lot of varieties that you can't usually buy as transplants from the store. However, that does come with its own bundle of issues. Unfortunately, I have been hit by a bout of dampening off, or mold or something is killing a whole lot of my seedlings. Unfortunately, I have lost almost every plant in this entire tray to this fungal mold thing. Whereas these ones planted in a different brand of potting mix have survived perfectly fine right next to them. This is classic dampening off issues. You can tell because the stem itself gets pinched and the whole thing just falls over. Basically, the fungus is collapsing the cell structure in the stem and causing the plant to die. And I'm going to show you what I've been doing to try and treat it. Now, we don't get particularly hot summers, and the heat that we do have from the summer is quite short, and because of this we have to grow, for the most part, our peppers and our tomatoes in a tunnel house, which means for us it's July, so it's like the middle of winter, and I have started my peppers and my tomatoes. Now, this isn't the case all through New Zealand, but it definitely is the case down here. If we want to get a good, decent sized harvest, we're best to get them started early. So I have got mine on my heater propagation table, and then I have jerry-rigged these other propagation tables with an electric blanket and some plastic sort of matting to keep those safe from the water. And so far it's been working fine. It's been nice and warm, and I have to come in every evening and tuck them in to bed with some frost cloth to help keep that heat in. This is the first time I've done that with the electric blanket thing, but it seems to be working really well. What the problem is one of the types of potting mix that I have bought. I don't know if it was already had the mold spores in it, or if it's just holding the moisture a lot more. All the seedlings that are planted in that potting mix are struggling with some kind of mold, and a lot of them are dampening off and dying. So this morning I have gone through and pulled out a whole lot of the ones that were covered in mold, and unfortunately I didn't get around to videoing those. I did feed the seedlings with like a foliar feed of some seaweed, and I'm not sure if that was too strong. Some of them seem to have little spots after doing that, so I'm going to dilute that again by half. I did follow the instructions, but maybe it was a little too strong for them. But I think that has caused some kind of weakness in their leaves, so the ones that had the spots have been the ones that have developed this mold. I have just potted these all on. They originally grew in little pots all together, and the ones that got slightly damaged whilst moving, or the ones where the leaves are touching the potting mix, they were the ones that were most susceptible to getting this fungal infection. A few days ago, before it got too bad, I did sprinkle around quite a lot of cinnamon in an attempt to quell the fungal infection that is happening, but unfortunately I think it's too far gone, and the cinnamon, whilst I believe it works quite well as a preventative, it doesn't seem to be very effective as a treatment. So what I am using is some 3% hydrogen peroxide, which you can buy pretty easily. I actually have 60% hydrogen peroxide, which is considered a hazardous substance, and you have to be really, really careful with it. What I do is I dilute it down into bottles, which are equal to a 3% solution. There are online calculators that make that conversion really easy. And then once you've got your 3% solution, which apparently in the US is incredibly cheap to buy in a bottle, the suggested dilution to do on plants is between 8 and 12 tablespoons in a gallon, which for us who use the metric system, that's about 30 mils per litre. So that is what I have put into one of my pump sprayers. You can also put it in like a trigger gun spray bottle, but because I have so many plants, I've put it in a pump sprayer. If you are treating huge tomato plants and rows of them, you might prefer to get a backpack sprayer. It's a little bit easier on your back and a lot less constantly. This spray can be used for any fungal infection on tomatoes and peppers, and it can also help somewhat with powdery mildew on cucurbits, so your cucumbers, zucchinis and squash. All you need to do is mix it up. Be really careful with that peroxide. If you get it on your finger, it can sort of sting a bit and go white. It's not going to long term hurt you, but it does sting. And then you just want to douse everything with a good spray down. Ideally your end of your sprayer will go to a nice fine mist. Unfortunately the one I'm using is not the greatest, and so I'm just kind of having to make do, but give everything a really good spray down the soil, and you can repeat it up to twice a week. Now my suggestion would be to try it on a few plants first at this dilution. You can go less strong. If you're doing this to plants that are outside in strong sunlight, make sure you do it in the early morning or the late evening to try and keep them out of that sun, because the sun, it can make them a wee bit more susceptible to getting burnt. So these seedlings that have unfortunately been eaten pretty much alive by this mold, I have re-sown them, and so I hope that they come away nice and quickly on these heated tables. The other thing I am going to do is add some fans, because one of the reasons that you end up with fungal problems is if there's not enough airflow, and previously I've not had that problem in here, but I think it's that combination of probably some infected potting mix, because the other potting mixes I've got don't have this problem. So it's only this one from this particular bag. The other two reasons that this mold might be overgrowing is, one, it's quite warm, but obviously to get my peppers and tomatoes growing I do need that warmth, and so there's airflow, warmth, and too much moisture, and I do wonder if that might be part of the problem too. I've never babysat plants quite as intensively as I have been with these guys, because I'm really hoping that they all do really well, and maybe my neglect in previous years of watering quite so regularly actually was to my benefit, so I'm going to ease off the amount of watering I'm doing on these. I hope you found that helpful. Here's my playlist on other things I have about growing tomatoes, particularly in colder areas like what we have, and I will see you in the next one.